Most people don't fail because they don't have enough time. They fail because they underestimate the impact that small efforts can make over time. Extraordinary businesses, careers, or creative projects weren't built in giant leaps. They were built in the ordinary hours. So grab your cup of tea and let's talk about the 1 hour rule. It's easy to believe that your biggest goals simply require more time or the perfect moment to begin. But according to Steven Pressfield, who wrote the book, Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be, it comes down to one key thing, and that is showing up consistently. On this channel recently, I've talked a lot about skill maxing. I've talked about getting to your zone of genius. I've talked about having a keystone goal. And I've talked about getting so good that they can't ignore you. But it's one thing to have big goals to build your skills or to unlock the next level of your potential. But how do you actually put that into practice? That is where the 1 hour rule comes in, which I want to discuss in more detail in today's episode. It is the simple practice that is going to help you to create momentum towards your biggest goals and to move closer to the future that you want most. But before we get to the 1 hour rule, we have to first discuss what the 1 hour rule is actually fighting against, because this is really important to put a name to what this is. And that name is resistance. This is the enemy of whatever it is that you are trying to achieve. So when Steven Pressfield talks about this idea of putting your ass where your heart wants to be, he means this physically, he means it mentally, metaphorically, and also spiritually, because he's talking about the idea of having to fight against this internal force, this resistance. And when you think of the word resistance, see this as resistance with a capital R. He is really clear on this, because you need to see it as a character that you are fighting against. This is a character that shows up right before a breakthrough. It is the character that shows up to hinder your efforts towards the things that are most meaningful to you. And this idea of resistance, which is something that Steven Pressfield also talks about in his book, The War of Art, is a character that has many different guises. So it can show up in the form of procrastination or perfectionism or over researching ideas before you actually get started. It can be in the form of busy work. It can show up when you are over planning. It can show up when you are experiencing self-doubt or a fear of criticism or a fear of what other people might think. It can be even that feeling when you are waiting for inspiration to strike before actually taking action. It can also be that feeling of comparing yourself to other people. So for all of these possible scenarios and guises, this is what Steven Pressfield labels as resistance. So it's something that you have to be aware of when you're trying to undertake any sort of project or goal or creative pursuit that you are aiming for. It's that resistance is likely going to show up in some way. Steven Pressfield says, the most formidable antagonist of all resides inside each of our own skulls. And the idea that Steven Pressfield really reiterates in Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be is this idea that the real enemy is resistance. So it's not your lack of time, it's not a lack of talent. It is this idea of resistance that is keeping you from doing the things that are most important to you. And the way that you can pay attention to how this might manifest itself in your everyday thoughts are the thoughts that you might have that you'll start tomorrow, or I don't have enough time, or someone else is already doing this thing, or what if they judge me, or I'm not ready yet, or I need another course before I begin. And the bigger your dream, the stronger resistance is likely to be. But what separates amateurs from professionals, as Pressfield highlights in the book, is expecting that resistance. So professionals don't magically have no resistance. They don't magically experience none of those things that we have talked about, all those different guises that resistance can show up in. But they expect it. And they have given it this label. They understand that this is a part of their process and they show up anyway. They are consistent in the way that they commit to whatever it is that they are working on, their project, their goal, their creative pursuit, whatever it is that they want to achieve something in. So, by the way, the book Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be is really geared towards creatives or people that have this creative project within them. But as I'll explain when we get to the 1 hour rule, this is something that you can apply to any field that you are in. But before I get to that, if you already feel like you are putting in the hours and you're not getting any results, then check out my earlier episode that I did on the art of practice, because this really goes in to how you can direct those hours that you put in a really specific way. But first, let's talk about the 1 hour rule, because this was something that really stood out to me when I read the book Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be, probably about 4 years ago now. And the maths was so astounding to me that it has just stuck with me ever since. I always think when you think those little efforts aren't going to add up, I remember these calculations and I remind myself what they are going to compound into. So Pressfield really highlights the power of spending just 1 hour a day on your project, because that 1 hour is going to turn into 7 hours a week, which is approximately 30 hours a month, which is 365 hours a year. And this next part is the bit that really gets me, and that is that 365 hours a year is the equivalent of approximately 9 40-hour work weeks. So can you imagine, for example, so every time I hear that maths, I imagine, for example, working a 9 to 5 job and asking to have 9 weeks off to work on a project. So maybe you want to start a business, maybe you want to study, maybe you want to create content and have your own YouTube channel or podcast or focus on other social media platforms. Maybe you want to write a book or spend more time volunteering or learning to play an instrument or learning a new language. Whatever it is, can you imagine having 9 weeks off, which is more than our summer holidays, for example, growing up, to be able to focus on that thing? That is a huge amount of time. That is almost the equivalent, the way that I like to see it, as a term in school. But when you think about the fact that that time is available to you without you having to take these huge chunks of time off of work, without you having to request that leave. And for most people, that isn't going to usually be something that is going to be available to you anyway to be able to do. It is astounding that you still have that ability to put in that number of hours into your project, into your goal, into whatever your pursuit is. And the beauty of spending 1 hour a day on your goal, as opposed to trying to concentrate all of your efforts into a really small amount of time, is that every time that you show up for whatever it is that you are trying to achieve, you are casting a vote towards that thing. And this is something that I talked about when I discussed the book, The Slight Edge, that your daily actions are a vote towards the person you want to be. And you're either casting a vote that is going to get you closer to that person that you want to be or further away. So when you, for example, sit down to write, then you are casting a vote that says, I am a writer. When you post a video, when you post a photo, you are casting a vote that says, I am a creator. When you play the instrument that you have wanted to learn, you are casting a vote that says, I am a musician. And this also leads into another really important point, which is the physical element of put your ass where your heart wants to be. So, for example, if you want to be better at playing the piano, then you need to put your ass on the piano seat. If you want to be better at being a writer, if you want to be a writer, then you have to put your physical body in your chair at your desk to write. So that is where the physical and the mental part of the 1 hour rule is really important. And in the book, Pressfield says, station your physical body in the spot where your dream work will and must happen. And something that he really highlights is showing up at a time and a place that you have committed to. So being really clear on those two dimensions. And from a more spiritual perspective, when he talks about this idea of putting your ass where your heart wants to be, he references the muses, for example, knowing where to meet you. So if you are that person that shows up in the same spot at the same time, then inspiration is bound to eventually strike. He advocates that the universe is going to respond to your commitment. He says, the universe responds to the hero or heroine who takes action and commits. It responds positively. It comes to the hero's aid. So the 1 hour rule is not about finding more time. It's about deciding what deserves your time and knowing that that 1 hour is going to compound into bigger results than you can imagine at the time. Thanks so much. Subscribe for more like this, and I'll see you in the next episode.